found yourself wondering if the traditional classroom, with its bells and structured curriculum, is truly the only path, the only way to unlock a child's full potential?
Uh-huh.
Or maybe you felt, well, overwhelmed by all the educational choices out there, wishing for something simpler, more tailored.
It's funny, isn't it, how often we think of school in just one very specific way. Like one image comes to mind.
Exactly.
But the reality, especially now, I mean, the world's changing so fast.
Yeah.
It's much more diverse, much more dynamic.
Mm.
So today we're taking a deep dive into a topic that's really gaining attention globally and definitely in places like India. We're talking about homeschooling.
Indeed. And our mission here with this deep dive is to take your sources, listener, your notes, and really explore this idea of homeschooling. Specifically, from an Indian perspective, we want to uncover its history, the very personal reasons families choose it, the outcomes, which can be quite surprising, and of course, the unique challenges and opportunities, especially in India.
Yeah, an Indian context is key here.
Our goal is really to give you a clear, nuanced, and informed picture of this, quietly growing educational movement.
Okay.
So let's kick off by clarifying what we actually mean, because I think there's sometimes a bit of confusion around the term.
Definitely.
At its core, homeschooling is when parents step in as the child's main full-time educators. They teach them directly at home.
Right there in the household.
Yeah, it's a deliberate academic alternative to sending kids off to a traditional public or private school. Think of it like bringing the whole school environment, all its possibilities, right into the home.
That intentionality is important.
Now, a really crucial distinction here, and we need to be super clear about this, homeschooling is not the same as online learning or e-learning.
That's a common mix-up.
Totally. When we talk about online platforms, like BYJUs or Unacademy, you're dealing with expert teachers, structured programs, all delivered remotely.
From a distance, yeah.
With homeschooling, it's fundamentally different. It's a conscious choice by the parents to teach directly. They often work with their child to build a syllabus, maybe make it more versatile, tailor it to the child's own interests and inspiration. It's very hands-on, parent-led.
Absolutely. That distinction is critical. And, if we look back at the history, the modern homeschooling movement really started gathering steam back in the 1970s.
The 70s, okay.
Yeah, and it was largely pushed forward by some visionary educational thinkers. John Holt, for instance. He was an activist.
I've heard of him.
Right? He argued really passionately against what he saw as rote learning and the kind of authoritarian vibe in formal schools.
Authoritarian. Interesting.
He felt these systems were basically designed to churn out obedient workers, not really foster genuine curiosity or independent thinking. His work was a real call to arms for parents, like, liberate your kids from this mold.
Wow, strong words.
Very. And then, building on Holt's ideas, you had another influential scholar, Raymond Moore. He added to these concerns.
Okay, what was his angle?
Moore suggested that starting formal schooling too early could actually be, harmful to a child's overall development.
Harmful? Really?
Yeah. He advocated for kids to be schooled at home until they were about 8 or 9. He believed this early home-based learning provided a much more solid foundation educationally, socially, and even spiritually.
So Holt and Moore were really pushing back hard against the status quo. It sounds quite revolutionary for the time.
Oh, absolutely, revolutionary. But clearly their ideas resonated deeply enough to spark a real movement.
And it's grown since then.
Massively. Since those early days, it's just exploded. It's become a genuine social shift, spreading all over the world. Increasingly common in, both developed and developing countries.
Can you give us a sense of the scale? Like numbers?
Sure. Just look at the U.S. In 2020, 2021, estimates put the number of K-12 homeschool students somewhere between 4.0 and 5.0 million.
4 to 5 million.
Yeah. That's roughly, 7 to 9% of all school-age kids, which is a huge jump from just 2019 when it was about 2.5 million, or 3 to 4%.
Wow, that's almost doubled in just a couple of years.
Exactly. It had been growing steadily, like 2 to 8% a year for ages, but that recent surge, it really shows how fast this is accelerating.
Okay, so with that kind of significant growth, the big question is, why? What are the deep reasons pushing families to make such a major shift? It's definitely not a small decision.
No, it's monumental. You're right.
Yeah.
And the motivations, they're incredibly diverse, often tangled together. But a primary driver, when we see again and again, is just a deep dissatisfaction with mainstream schooling.
Okay, dissatisfaction. Like, how?
Well, it's not just griping. It's often a fundamental issue for them. Parents might have serious concerns about the social environment, bullying, peer pressure, things like that, or the academic quality. Maybe they feel it's lacking, or just the lack of personalized opportunities in their local schools.
Right, a one-size-fits-all problem.
Exactly. They might have different religious or educational beliefs, or they just see their kids aren't, well, thriving in the standard system, maybe feeling lost or, stifled. Then there's this powerful desire for truly personalized learning. Many parents want to create a custom experience, something that really focuses on their child's own case, their unique interests, their strengths.
Tailoring it completely.
Precisely. And this becomes super relevant in systems with those rigid, one-size-fits-all curricula and really high exam pressure, which, let's face it, is a big factor in places like India.
Oh, definitely. The pressure is immense.
And that kind of pressure, can sometimes crush creativity and cause a lot of stress for kids. Homeschooling offers a way out of that specific dynamic.
That desire for personalization really underscores the philosophical shift, doesn't it? Moving away from mass education towards nurturing the individual.
Absolutely. And tied right into that is emotional safety, well-being. Homeschooling lets families build a really secure, nurturing environment. They can consciously sidestep issues like bullying or maybe discipline they feel is too rigid, or just those high-stress school atmospheres that can really impact a child's mental health.
So it can be less stressful.
Potentially, yes. It's a direct way to try and lower stress and anxiety around learning. Create a kind of safe space.
Okay.
What else? Well, it's also incredibly adaptable. Think about kids with diverse needs or special talents.
Oh.
Whether a child has learning disabilities, ADHD, anxiety, or maybe they're incredibly talented in sports or music and need a flexible schedule for intense training.
Like the Williams sisters.
Exactly like them. Homeschooling provides that flexibility that a traditional school often just can't offer.
Makes sense.
And then, maybe the most profound reason for some, it fosters a unique parent-child bond.
More time together.
Loads more quality time. Building that strong relationship, that deep sense of emotional security and trust. Parents become, much more tuned in to their child's emotional state, their learning rhythms. It allows for a really responsive teaching approach.
That sounds really appealing.
It can be. Oh, and sometimes there are practical financial reasons, too. For some families, it can actually be a less expensive route to a good education.
Right. So that's a really compelling set of reasons. Very personal, very deliberate. But let's switch gears a bit to something I know is on a lot of listeners' minds.
Let me guess. Socialization.
You got it. That's almost always the first question, isn't it? What about socialization? And also, what does the research actually say about outcomes? Academically, socially, what happens to these kids?
Yeah, it's a totally valid concern. Let's tackle the academic side first. The research, maybe surprisingly to some, suggests homeschooled students often outperform their peers from conventional schools.
Outperform? Really?
Yeah. In the U.S., for example, they typically score, get this, 15 to 30 percentile points higher on standardized tests.
Wow. 15 to 30 points. That's huge.
It is. They're also more likely to read above their grade level and show stronger independent learning skills, which, are gold for later life.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Self-starters.
Exactly. And this often carries through to college. Homeschool students who go on to higher education frequently have higher GPAs, better graduation rates. They tend to be known as really self-motivated, responsible learners. Skills they kind of had to develop managing their own learning at home.
Okay, so academically, the picture looks pretty positive.
Yeah.
What about the emotional side?
Well, as we touched on, it can significantly reduce stress and anxiety. Kids might feel freer to express themselves, engage more deeply with what they're learning, and it definitely fosters that deep parent-child bond we mentioned.
Right. Now, back to the S word, socialization.
Right, the big one. Critics often argue, that these kids miss out on daily interactions with lots of peers, which sounds logical, but the research paints a more nuanced picture if parents are intentional about it.
Intentional? How?
Through things like community groups, sports teams, music lessons, art classes, specific homeschool co-ops where kids learn together if they actively plan for social interaction. Then these children develop really strong social skills. In fact, some studies suggest they might even show better interpersonal maturity and self-concept compared to kids in traditional schools.
Better. Why would that be?
Potentially because their social interactions are often more diverse with people of different ages, not just a classroom full of same-age peers, and maybe more deliberate, less driven by cliques, perhaps.
That's fascinating. It really challenges that common assumption, doesn't it? It suggests socialization isn't just about being in a school building.
Exactly. And the success stories really hammer this home. They show the incredible potential. Globally, you've got icons like Thomas Edison, Agatha Christie, even Einstein. They were homeschooled or self-directed learners because they just didn't fit the traditional mold.
Right, the famous example.
And more recently, you have Simone Biles, the Olympic gymnast, Venus and Serena Williams, homeschooled to support those demanding training schedules. Proof that this flexibility can lead to amazing things.
And it's not just a Western thing, right? You mentioned India has examples too.
Oh, absolutely. India has some really compelling stories. Take Malavika Joshi from Mumbai, accepted into MIT at 17.
MIT, without a regular high school diploma.
Exactly. Based purely on her exceptional academic record and amazing programming skills she developed largely on her own.
Incredible.
Or think about the Maji twins from Hyderabad, homeschooled. They achieved top ranks in both JEE and NEET exams.
Wow, JG and NEET. Those are incredibly competitive.
Fiercely competitive, it really shows.
What these stories really highlight, I think, is that school isn't necessarily about the building. It's more about the approach, the mindset. It's about intentionally cultivating things like self-direction, resilience, deep curiosity, not just rote learning. That seems to be what sets these achievers apart.
Well said. And shifting focus specifically to India now. While homeschooling isn't maybe as widespread as in the US or UK, it is growing significantly, especially in the big cities, Bangalore, Pune, Mumbai.
Okay, so what's the situation there, legally and practically?
Well, it's interesting. Right now, homeschooling isn't formally governed by any specific government department in India. No official oversight.
Generally, no. Homeschoolers aren't usually required to register or file anything with authorities. They often choose to follow a curriculum like CBSE or their state board as a guide, but it's often informal.
So is it actually legal?
That's where it gets a bit murky. There's the Right of Children to Free and Compulsory Education Act, the RTE Act of 2009. It mandates formal education for kids aged 6 to 14.
Right.
But since homeschooling isn't explicitly defined as a school in that act, its legal standing is kind of debated. It's a gray area.
So families operate without formal recognition.
Often, yes. They navigate pathways like NIOS, National Institute of Open Schooling, or appear as private candidates for CBSE exams to get certifications, which, can add logistical hurdles and stress if they're aiming for higher education.
I can imagine. What's the government's general attitude? Historically, it's sort of fluctuated. While the Constitution doesn't promote it, the government generally doesn't intervene or, act against families who homeschool.
Sort of a don't ask, don't tell approach.
A bit like that, perhaps. But there has been a positive shift recently. The National Education Policy, NEP, both in 2020 and the updates in 2024, have actually shown support for alternative learning models.
Ah, okay. So a potential opening up.
It signals a move towards more inclusive options, yeah, which is encouraging for homeschooling families.
Okay. So while we see the benefits, the success stories, the potential legal shifts, it's obviously not an easy path. What are some of the really tough challenges parents face when they take this on?
Oh, it's hugely demanding. You're absolutely right. The demands on the parents are immense. It takes significant time, tons of planning, incredible patience, and the ability to facilitate learning across all sorts of subjects, not just the ones you're good at.
Yeah, I can't imagine teaching calculus if I haven't done it in decades.
Exactly. Parents can really struggle to find the right resources or manage, say, 2 or 3 kids at different grade levels simultaneously, or just keeping up with changing curricula or exam standards if they're trying to align. Some parents talk about finding it genuinely hard to balance being parent and teacher. That role shift can be tricky, and there's a definite lack of direct government funding or formal support structures for homeschoolers in India right now.
And the parents themselves, how do they feel?
Some express feeling, incompetent or unprepared, doubting if they can really teach everything their child needs.
That's understandable.
And some specific drawbacks that sources mention. Kids potentially getting restless or misbehaving if the structure isn't quite right. The cost of books and materials can add up significantly.
Right, you don't have the school library.
Exactly. There's the risk, if not managed carefully, of kids feeling isolated or frustrated by limited social interaction. Or learning becoming irregular if the parent's schedule gets disrupted. Or, like you said, if the parent just doesn't have a broad grasp of all subjects. It really requires parents to become curriculum designers, facilitators, constant learners themselves.
That point about parents feeling unprepared is key, I think. It suggests homeschooling isn't about being an expert teacher in everything,
No, not at all.
but maybe more about being an expert facilitator, knowing how to find resources, how to guide the learning for your specific child.
Precisely. That's a great way to put it.
So how are families managing these challenges, especially in India, where the support structures might be less developed?
They're finding really creative and effective ways. Lots of families join homeschooling networks online and offline. They share resources, advice, support.
Building community.
Exactly. Many use structured curriculum providers, NEOs, IGCSE boards, or they opt for the CBSE private candidate route for exams. That provides a framework. And they leverage online platforms that offer full learning support.
Using the available tools.
Definitely. And India, we're seeing these homeschool communities really blossoming in cities like Pune, Bengaluru, Chennai.
What do these communities do?
They offer crucial peer support for parents and kids. They organize shared classes, group field trips, workshops. It's a huge support system.
And does that help with the social aspect too?
Massively. It helps counter those unfounded stigmas about socialization. It shows homeschooling as a viable, socially connected choice. And it just empowers parents, makes them feel less alone on the journey.
Okay. So wrapping things up, what does this all mean for you, our listener? This deep dive really shows that homeschooling isn't just some, fringe alternative. It's a serious, full-time commitment, a deliberate, often life-changing decision to educate differently.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And if we connect it back to the bigger picture, the evidence seems pretty clear. When it's planned well, when there's real intention and commitment behind it, homeschooling can lead to excellent academic results, good emotional health, and really well-rounded kids.
Yeah.
It's not an escape route. It's an active, deeply involved process. It demands huge patience, a long-term view, and, as we said, a willingness from parents to constantly learn and adapt themselves.
So ultimately, for you, listener, maybe the question is this. If you're seeking an educational path where creativity can genuinely flourish, where flexibility is paramount, where emotional security and that strong parent-child connection are top priorities, and if you are truly ready to actively participate in, guide, and shape that learning journey yourself, then perhaps homeschooling isn't just an alternative. Perhaps it's a genuinely viable, potentially incredibly enriching option.
It offers that space, doesn't it? Space for a child to grow without the constant pressure to conform. Building confidence, real curiosity, those essential lifelong learning skills.
So, maybe here's a final thought to leave you with. What if the true measure of a great education isn't where it happens in a building or at the kitchen table, but how deeply it connects with a child's individual spark, their unique curiosity, and the unwavering support they get along that personalized path?
Perhaps the best classrooms don't have four walls at all. Maybe they're just the boundless world of possibility, fostered right there at home.